This video will contain spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us Part 2 is arguably one of the most awarded games of this generation, with over 200 Game of the Year awards and countless other accolades. But it's also one of the most divisive games of this generation, mostly revolving around the narrative and how it was handled, but in no small part attributed to one of the largest video game leaks in history, where nearly 3 months before the game was released, someone gained access to Naughty Dog's backend systems and was able to view developmental footage of the game, as well as major plot spoilers and tons of other information about Naughty Dog and its employees. This sent the whole internet into a frenzy. Everyone was scrambling, and I remember this because I was just one of those people who was scrolling Twitter one day and then bam, I get hit with spoilers. So, after seeing those spoilers, I figured I'd dive in and essentially looked at as much of the leaks as I could. While this normally wouldn't have been something I did, I figured at the time, what else could I lose? Even after seeing all those leaks and all those spoilers, I still wanted to pick the game up day one and see how it actually unfolded, because I don't think that's something that many people bothered to do themselves. They heard some half-assed truth about the game, and they didn't bother to experience it for themselves. While the narrative of this game might not hit the same for every person, this was not the way that Naughty Dog wanted the players to experience that moment, and it sucked that so many people had it ruined for them. So in preparation of the second season of the TV show airing on Max, I figured what better time to revisit the game and give the PC port a go, and dive into this dark and twisted story together.
I have to finish it.
There's a cost.
So I like to start all my reviews off with a technical block, and I went ahead and I played The Last of Us Part 2 on PC, running an RTX 4080 and an i7-13700 with all the settings at their max values, DLSS set to quality, and I did have frame generation enabled, but Nvidia's latest drivers have caused massive instability with G-Sync monitors and frame generation enabled, so I had that disabled at the time being. There was a new driver update that released a couple days ago, but I haven't had a chance to test that out for myself. But for a majority of the time, I got a solid 120 to 140 FPS. There were some dips in moments when I was transitioning from area to area, but nothing that was egregious or nothing that ruined my playtime in the game, which is a good sign considering the state that the first game launched in when it was released 2 years ago on PC. That first game was notorious for running like absolute shit, which was even the case for me back when I just had bought the 4080 and it was brand new at that point. While I've heard this port does struggle a little bit on lower end hardware, it's probably best for you to check out a video with comparable specs on your PC if you are considering picking this one up. Graphically, I forgot how good this game looked until I booted it up again this go around on PC. And looking back, I've played this game through on a multitude of configurations now. I originally played it on the original PS4 Slim, and then again on a PS4 Pro, and later down the line on a PS5 when they did the 60 FPS patch, albeit it still was the PS4 version of the game, and then now here with the release of the PC port. The cutscenes, the environments look just as good as they've ever been here, and now even at a higher frame rate, it's the only way that I ever want to play this game. Facial details, the animations, they're all on another level, and to think this game came out in 2020 still blows my mind. If you do want a deeper dive on the technical analysis of this port, Digital Foundry has a great video that breaks it down and does a deeper dive into it as well. Easily the most talked about part of the game has to be the narrative and the way that it unfolds across these certain points of the game. Now, I will be talking about spoilers for the main story in this section, so if you would like to avoid any spoilers, this is your chance to leave. I know I said at the beginning of the video, but I still want to be respectful of the people who haven't played the game. I know it's been like 5 years since it's come out, but there are going to be a lot of people who are jumping into this for the first time if they're fans of that TV show, and like I said, I do want to be respectful of that. The Last of Us Part 2 takes place 5 years after the events of the first game, with Joel and Ellie now living in the town of Jackson. While it isn't alluded to right away, that relationship with the two is strained for one reason or another. This opening section sees us playing as Ellie, following Jesse around Jackson as you're going about your morning routine before you do head out on patrol with Dina after hearing about some events that occurred the night before. And in between these moments, you'll be swapping to another character named Abby. You'll see that she's looking for someone just outside of Jackson, and it's in this search that she's nearly killed by a horde of infected, only to be saved by Tommy and Joel, the man she's looking for. These first 2 hours of the game are what really, and I mean really, pissed a lot of people off, especially when it came to the leaks that came out. Leading up to the release, we all figured that Ellie was going to be on a brutal murder rampage for someone killing Dina, or at least that's what many of us thought, and the trailers would have you believing so. But it's actually Joel who is brutally killed by Abby and her group of friends, with Ellie arriving shortly after witnessing the tail end of the killing. This moment, man, fucked me up that first time I watched it, and I still kind of hate watching it to this day. Even 4 playthroughs through, I know it's coming, and it still gives me anxiety each time leading up to that moment. The way you can hear the screams as Ellie, and when you go down to that door, you know what's gonna happen, and it fucking sucks, man. Would I have liked to seen Joel put up a fight, and would I have liked to seen him make the hero's last stand? Hell yeah, I would have, but that's not how it works out in this world and in this game. And when it's all said and done, Joel did some pretty shitty things and quite possibly changed the course of history with his actions. This series of events kicks off Ellie and Dina's journey to chase down and find those people who are responsible for Joel's murder. These sections in Seattle are some of my favorite in the game, and especially early on, there's this section that flirts with the idea of being open world, with you having access to just a decent chunk of downtown Seattle where you can explore different buildings, find optional gear, and tons of different lore entries that give you a little bit more insight on the area that you're in. It's an area that you can spend 20 minutes in, or you can spend 2 hours in if you wanted to. And like I said, there's tons of little locations. There's a record shop. I would really recommend going there. You can find all sorts of trading cards. Go to the bank too, you might find a little ring. But with each passing day, Ellie is able to take out some of the members of Abby's group, also while finding bodies that Tommy had left behind. All the while, Dina reveals that she's pregnant with Jesse's kid, and Ellie having to reveal her immunity to Dina after her mask is broken in an escape. I know it's a lot to get thrown at, but that's just day one. Trust me, that's just day one. Each day in Seattle is going to have you visiting different parts of the city, with the first day being mostly that downtown area and kind of the surrounding areas within it. And then that second day is going to be taking place within the suburbs. That part's really cool. It's a lot more spread out. You're going to be dealing with a lot more military group factions there. There's dogs. They're a bit of a pain in the ass, but it's also a fun area to dip between a lot of the houses and offers up a lot of cool stealth opportunities, I think. And then you get the just rainy downpour of day 3, which has you going through the streets of Seattle on your way to an aquarium. Each day you felt it getting darker and darker with that approaching storm in the distance, but with each day you're also treated to a flashback sequence with Joel as Ellie, memories of the good times, or at least what she thought was the good times. You get to see a younger Ellie between the events of part 1 and part 2 after that Salt Lake incident, and how that moment slowly unraveled and her and Joel's relationship became what it was when you saw it here at the start of the game. These memories, in contrast to the cycle of violence and the theme of revenge, is something that this game really wants to hammer home early on, and especially as you progress further and further with Ellie. You get to see the toll that it starts to take on her, not just physically, but you also get to see what it does to her mentally, and to grapple with the things that she's done in the name of revenge and in order to track down the person who did it all. Which brings us to our second character that we play as. After a confrontation at the theater after the end of Ellie's segment in day 3, we are then switched to the perspective of Abby, the character that we were playing as at the beginning of the game, a former Firefly and the daughter of the doctor that Joel killed at the end of the first game. This was also one of the biggest things that was partially spoiled for me leading up to the release of the game, and seeing the way that they did that reveal was something that I didn't expect it to land as well as it did for me when I was playing through that game when it first came out. You get to see her in that direct aftermath of Joel's carnage and essentially what ended up happening to all those people that survived. Abby and her friends would then in turn run to Seattle to join the WLF, a military faction with resources and manpower led by a man named Isaac. Abby, all the while herself bulking up substantially, training herself for that inevitable moment whenever it would come. Her story in Seattle after the events of Jackson also do run concurrent with Ellie's story as you're playing through them, so when the bodies of Abby's friends start to turn up, you'll get to see her reaction to those choices that Ellie made. Allowing us to play as Abby to see her friends is a good way to try to sympathize them instead of how Ellie sees them, and that's murderers who traveled thousands of miles just to kill one person. Sound kind of familiar, right? But soon you see the choice to come to Jackson had more consequences than Abby initially realizes. One by one, her life essentially falls apart and everything she knows is tossed to the wind. She's nearly killed by Seraphites, a religious cult and the enemy faction of the WLF, and then is saved by one of their own people, Lev and his sister, Yara. These two are going to be instrumental to Abby's story because in them she sees this sort of chance for redemption. After all the terrible, fucked up shit that she's done, maybe doing right by these kids can give her some sort of peace. Naughty Dog really wants you to empathize with Abby, and you either will or you won't. And for some, that's going to be a nearly impossible task considering all that she's done. This, I will admit, is a hard sell to diehard fans, but at the time when I first played this game, I was new to the franchise and I was trying to look at it from an open perspective. Abby did what she thought was going to bring her peace in Jackson, but really all it did was leave her feeling more empty than she'd ever been feeling before. And with this decision to help the kids, Abby is AWOL, essentially on the run from both factions. It's an all-out war that starts on the Seraphite Island, and it's here that Abby returns to the aquarium to just leave Seattle once and for all, only to find the cold, lifeless bodies of Owen and Mel, who is shown to be pregnant, with Ellie's map laying in the blood-soaked waters. Each story for the characters comes to its intersection point, and you start to feel that only one of them is going to come out on top. And when you're asked to play as Abby, most of the time you're hunting down Seraphites and you really don't have any thought or feel bad about taking them down. But when these two meet at the theater, you're tasked with hunting Ellie down, with her utilizing all the tactics and the tools that you would use if you were the one playing as Ellie in this scenario. And this, I hated this sequence because I don't want to kill Ellie. I don't want to kill Ellie. What the hell am I supposed to do? And it's after that back and forth fight leads to its boiling point. Abby incapacitates Ellie. She's about to slit Dina's throat, and it's at this moment the pleading of Lev stops her, with the two parties going their separate ways, never to be seen again. Or at least that's how you think it would have ended. Ellie and Dina return home, with the latter giving birth to Jesse's kid, hoping to start a family together and move on from all that transpired in Jackson and Seattle. Except when you see Ellie in these segments, she's skinny, she's frail, she looks like she's a former shell of herself. And while Dina tries to mend those broken scars, there's really only one thing that's going to resolve this issue once and for all. And after receiving a tip from Tommy about a woman built like an ox, Ellie leaves for Santa Barbara. And on the flip side, Abby and Lev have traveled all this way in hopes of following up on a final lead that Owen had heard about in Seattle, the last remnants of the Fireflies and a possible regrouping. And after making radio contact, Abby and Lev are unfortunately both captured by the Rattlers, who are the enemy faction in this area. They are pieces of shit. The Santa Barbara section is one that I do wish was just a little bit longer because there's so much that I want answers for. This section is going to run you, I'd say, probably like 45 minutes to an hour if you're really trying to explore and find all the collectibles. But like the questions I have, where do the Rattlers come from? Are the Fireflies actually back? Like, what's going on here? I know the ending of the game is also pretty divisive for one way or another, but the choice that Ellie makes to not kill a weak and frail Abby is one that we come to find is rooted in her love for Joel. And in his last days, she wanted to try and forgive him. We get a flashback to that porch scene where the two have a conversation and they talk. Ellie says, "I wish that my life would have mattered." And Joel says that he would do it all over again. But it was progress. It was a step. They wanted to try to work together to fix those issues that they had. And while I'm not saying that Ellie would totally forgive Abby, that cycle of violence and revenge is something in this world that will not end until one person stops. And each character's life is completely upended and ruined by the end of the main story. I mean, look at Ellie. Everyone she's loved is either dead, gone, or missing. She's missing 2 fingers at the end of the game. She can't play the guitar anymore. The guitar is the one thing that Joel taught her how to do, and it was a way for her to connect to him through that medium. Abby's life is basically pretty shit at that point. All of her friends are dead, everything she's ever known, gone, destroyed. But her ending is also left a little bit more up in the air. She's underweight, brutally beaten, and basically her only priority in life is to keep Lev safe. Almost like Joel with Ellie in that first game. And while we don't get official confirmation if the Fireflies are back, we do see the boat sitting on the shore of Catalina Island as the new main screen once you've finished the game, indicating that maybe just her and Lev did in fact make it to the Fireflies. I don't know how they managed to make some of the most frantic combat while also still making it entertaining and not just being a total mess. Those moments where you're running from a clicker mid-reload so that you don't get torn apart, slipping through the cracks on a wall, is why I love this game so much. The environments themselves also offer up a lot of different ways to approach, like hiding in tall grass to conceal your position, or you can crawl under a car to slip by a patrol, because in this game you can go prone, which is a very nice addition. Something about the gameplay loop here in The Last of Us Part 2, it's simple on the surface level, but there's so much more that goes into making it work as well as it does here. Gameplay wise, The Last of Us Part 2 remains almost identical to the previous title, with combat, crafting, and looting remaining mostly unchanged. The puzzles and traversal sections have actually been spruced up a little bit. Gone are the days of just moving a dumpster around, but this time it's going to be a little bit more creative with each scenario. Whether you're using a rope, a plank, don't get me wrong, we're still going to have a few dumpster puzzles, but they're going to be a little bit more involved this time around. The gameplay in part 2 still remains some of my favorite gameplay in a video game to this date. It's brutal, it's violent, but most importantly, it's creative. If there's a group of clickers out there, or if there's just a group of infected, and there's a group of enemies, maybe you can draw them into each other and then slip away in the ensuing chaos. Or do you want to go in guns blazing and just try to take everyone out? Or do you want to try to stealth your way through? Each area that you walk into presents itself with choices, and sometimes those choices boil down to how much health you have, the different types of enemies that you can see, and also the different type of resources that you have at your disposal. Ellie and Abby are mostly going to play the same, with really the only big difference being Ellie is going to have her switchblade in hand at all times. There's no durability, never breaks. But whereas when you play as Abby, she can choke people out, but she isn't going to have a shiv or that knife for a quick, defense type thing. So you're going to have to craft those. While that's about the end of the different ways that they play, they do get different weapons and items that they can craft in the game throughout the chapters, with some being unlocked as part of the main story, and then others being found exploring the different chapters. Each character is also going to have its own separate set of skills, manuals, collectibles. Basically, you want to think that you're playing two separate games, with each part having its own collectibles for you to find. And then lastly, we have the newest offering to The Last of Us Part 2 that was added with the remastered version. That is the roguelite mode called No Return. And in this mode, just like other roguelite modes, you will be tasked with going through combat encounters, progressively trying to get stronger and stronger, and then earn more gear and upgrades as you go on. This genre has been something that has been tossed in other games tons of times. It seems like almost every game has a roguelite mode. The Division, God of War, you name it, it probably has it. But what I found to be interesting about this mode is that you're allowed to play as other characters in the Last of Us universe that also have their own abilities and skill sets. The goal of this whole mode is essentially to clear out encounter after encounter, and then once you clear an encounter, you're going to have a string that either leads to a top section or a bottom section. And then you can kind of preview what's in those next areas and whatever those next encounters and those enemy types are going to be. These encounters can range from attacking groups of enemies, or there will be enemies that spawn in and attack your position. These can also be randomized further with various buffs and then debuffs, like one where it'll make vaulting over objects, it'll make you run faster, or when enemies die, they drop grenades. Live grenades, by the way. I like these modifiers because they can keep the mode feeling a little fresh while also incentivizing you to pick maybe one room over another, because yeah, the encounter might be a little bit harder, but you'll be rewarded for it. And those rewards are going to be important because they are what you're going to use to upgrade your gear, your weapons, your supplements, your materials, all that. It's going to be important to making sure that you're able to survive that run. And the more runs and the more encounters that you complete, the more enemy types and the more rewards that you can unlock as well. So if you enjoy the combat of The Last of Us 2 mixed in with a little bit of a roguelite mode, this is easily something that you'll enjoy. If you did make it this far, I really do appreciate you sticking around and hearing what I have to say, regardless if you like the game or not, or if you're just a fan of the TV show. It's one that personally I really love, and I was really excited to jump back into with the PC release right around the airing of that second season, which does look like they're following the framework of the story, but mixing up a few things here. So I'm excited to see how that whole second season finishes up, but I've heard they only do part of the second game, so we'll probably get the other part of the second game sometime in 2027. The game itself remains one of the most profound pieces of storytelling in video game history, with themes like revenge, loss, and how that affects a person's mentality as you keep pushing forward towards that ultimate goal, whatever the cost might be. Narratively, the structure of part 2 might not be everyone's cup of tea, but that initial mystery of what happened in Jackson is something that eats at you the entire time you're playing as Ellie, and when you finally get to see the flip side of it from Abby's perspective, you're seeing events from a whole different perspective and framing that you didn't think about before. Gameplay remains rock solid with tons of options to go about combat encounters, whether you want to go stealthy, guns blazing, there's plenty of options for that. And if you prefer the more guns blazing method, the roguelite mode of No Return will definitely be up your alley. Random runs, rewards, offers up a lot of ways for you to play with the combat sandbox, and being able to play as other characters with different perks is a fun little addition to an already stellar package. The Last of Us Part 2 is a marvelous game from a technical, a gameplay, and a story perspective. I know that last one might be a little controversial, but after finishing this game 4 times, I still would rank it as one of my favorite titles of all time. We do know that Naughty Dog's next game is going to be Intergalactic, a brand new IP, and I'm excited to see what they do with their first new IP in a decade, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I'd want another Last of Us title. Neil Druckmann has said they do have an idea or a framework of what the next story or title would be, but if or when it would happen, and being that Intergalactic is still a few years away, it'll be some time before we hear about a possible sequel. If you did enjoy the video, drop a like on it, consider subscribing. I've got tons of other reviews, previews that I have on my channel, as well as other ones that I'm actively working on up here. Got Clair Obscur coming out. We've got the Oblivion remake that was officially announced while I was recording this. And then we've also got a couple other goodies coming up here in the next month. So consider subscribing if any of that interests you. But if you did make it this far, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day. And this has been my review for The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered on PC. Thank you for watching.